Good afternoon, students. There's a lot we can talk about today regarding Chapter 3. It's curriculum development and all the aspects that make a developmentally appropriate curriculum. If you're wondering if I have horns, I'll move my head. It's a deer head. That's the deer my son shot a few years ago. And as you can see, I still have the tree up, and it's February, but we'll take it down maybe by the end of February. All right. Your chapter talks about developmentally appropriate philosophies and practice throughout, of course, the whole text. But it focuses in on like practical things that you will have to learn when you start teaching or are in a classroom for young children. It talks about the importance of a routine. Yes, children need routines, but you soon realize that that routine every day must be also flexible. And that's because you must learn to meet the needs of children, and they need routines, but it must be flexible. I'll share with you a few things that I learned through the years that go along with things that were discussed in your chapter. Not all of you know, but I switched jobs after 4 years of teaching elementary school, moved to Pennsylvania, and guess what? There were no jobs in elementary education unless you knew somebody on the school board. So I started out substituting, which was not much fun for me. I didn't like it. But I was later offered a job with Head Start. I really knew nothing about Head Start. I'd heard the name, but I soon discovered it was the only federal program for young children in the nation, and it still is. It's the only federal program. I was hired on a Friday and told to start on Monday with 20 children waiting for me. Talk about anxiety through the roof. It was me. I had never taught young children before. I didn't even realize the differences between preschoolers and elementary school kids. But you know what saved me? I'll have to say I had the most wonderful assistant teacher already there who had been there 2 or 3 years. She's the one that helped me understand what I needed to do and what was important. Of course, if you know anything about Head Start, they have all kinds of documentation that you have to do, scads of paperwork that gets turned in every week. So I learned very quickly what was required of me and what it meant to teach young children. Head Start also believed in, and still does, in home visits. I had never visited a child's home in my life of teaching. It had never been done. So I was thrust out there to go to these homes of children living in rural areas, and I just could not believe it. It changed my perspective on teaching young children because at the time I visited homes that no water, no toilets, roaches all over the place, dog poop in every corner. That was typical of several homes that I would visit throughout the year. But what it did, it helped me understand those children more. It had helped me realize just where these children were coming from when they walked into my classroom. It also helped me realize and understand why some of their behaviors were the way they were, what was going on with them developmentally. So it opened my eyes, and I really wish to this day that every center had a policy of visiting your children at least once in their home setting. It really is opening to where they come from, and we know that working with parents is a must, and a lot of times it can give you perspective and understanding of parents when you see where they live or you're visiting that child in the home. I spent 7 years with Head Start, learned a lot. And then I had an opportunity to become a director and a preschool pre-K teacher in another setting, which was a high school, and it was a lab school for high school students. And wonderful, I was only allowed to have 10 children at a time. So I spent 7 years there. Every year I had 10 children, which was absolutely ideal. I had an assistant teacher, and we got started after I was there 2 years. We got started with Pennsylvania's pre-K, which it was a good thing, I guess. I had to go back to school again. And so I started my master's program while I was there. Some of the things I learned, I realized too that it is so important to keep those routines with young children. But one thing I did every single day, and I kind of based my philosophy on it, and it was, what do these children need? What do they need to thrive? What do they need to be creative, to problem solve, to use their imaginations? What can I do with them this day that will give them those opportunities? So, of course, you know, I believe firmly in play. And I always allocated every single day that 1 hour of uninterrupted play. And also, we had a great playground. It was 1 hour outside every day, even in the cold weather. I just made it a point because I knew children needed that uninterrupted time. We did all the other things that your chapter might mention: small groups, large groups, individualized work with young children. It was just a gamut of all the different things that you will see in an early childhood classroom, and I loved it. I wouldn't take away those days for anything. They taught me so much. Every once in a while, I'll see one of my former students, of course. They're high school age, some of them out of high school already. It's always interesting to see what they've done and how they're doing. It's interesting, though, very few of them remember me as a preschool teacher. And that's what you'll find. A lot of times, years down the road, you'll remember them. You may forget their names, you'll remember their faces, but usually they won't remember you. So in that respect, you might say, boy, this is a thankless job. But it really isn't, and you should know that what you put into those children's lives remain with them forever. And I would often hear about children that were so behaviorally kind of messed up when they were in preschool. They needed special attention. They needed a lot of things. But when they got into elementary school, as the years went by, it was so wonderful to hear that they were doing great. They were managing all the things that they had to do and learn in elementary school, and that always made me feel really good because I know I gave them a great foundation. One thing I learned too, and this is something you can take with you whenever you get to a classroom, whenever you're thrust into a brand new situation, maybe it's your first job working with young children, and you just don't know what the heck you're going to do. You have your guidelines, yeah, you have your education, but the nitty-gritty of, okay, what do I have to do to get ready for these children coming in? This chapter doesn't talk about setting up the room environment. We'll get to that in another chapter. Of course, you do that right off the bat, and you have to learn how to set up the room environment to make it developmentally appropriate for all the children. The other thing you've got to be ready to do is, okay, what do I do with these kids on their first day? What is the protocol? What should I do? Of course, you create a lesson plan. You'll learn about doing lesson plans by the week when you get to Practicum 1 and Practicum 2. So that's a given. But certain things I learned were just wonderful for the first day of school with young children. The one of them I never deviated from and did it every single year I taught, and that was Play-Doh. On the first day, I always had Play-Doh ready. It's a great way for the children to socialize. It's a great way for them to get to know one another. It's a great way just for teachers and the children to have conversation. It's wonderful. And I use Play-Doh all the time. After a couple weeks, I had them help me make it from then on in. But it was a wonderful experience. And I always made sure that there were some interesting stories to tell them. I didn't know if they'd be able to sit in a circle the first day, so it wasn't like they had to do that. but I knew if I had something interesting that they would want to congregate around me. And I always used my guitar, I always used music, and I always used puppets. That never failed to get their attention. So what worked, I used. I always made sure that they had outdoor time. They needed that exercise and play outside. So, your chapter discusses the basics. It gives you some lesson plans to look at, a weekly plan of infants and toddlers, and what it is, preschool. And it's a great chapter to give you a basic foundation of the very things that you're going to need to rely on when you do start teaching and when you start working with young children. You're in a great profession. You have to love kids, but it's got to be more than that. You've got to understand how much you really need to know and learn before you can be that great teacher. You've got to be a person who knows families are number one important, and do all the things you can to learn to get along with them and be successful and have a wonderful, developmentally appropriate curriculum. All right, that's it for today. Have a great one. Thanks.